Hello and welcome to our next Hall of Fame presentation with Don Wershba and the future of audio technology. Can we go ahead and welcome Don to the stage?
Thanks for being here. Is the song working? Good. Can you hear me both here in the room, and can you hear me wherever else I need to be heard? Thumbs up? It wouldn't be a
Just bear with us here, guys. We're having just a little snafu with the audio.
Try one more time. And thank you for coming. Get on with it. There we go. Okay, thanks. Hello, I'm Don Wershba. I'm the Senior Vice President of Solid State Logic, Inc., which is the U.S. arm of Solid State Logic, which is based in Oxfordshire, England. If you are familiar with the products, you've probably seen them both in the Mix Palace and the Audio Temple. We have consoles there. And what I'm going to walk you through is what's new at SSL. So without further ado, we're in three markets primarily, and they are live broadcast and music. So we're going to have a look at all three of those markets. We're going to start off with the family of live products. It consists of four control surfaces, the L100, the L200, the L350, and the L550, which are supported by both Maddie and Dante. Now, by a show of hands, if I could almost see you, people familiar with the Dante protocol? Excellent, because we're going to talk a bit about that in the next few slides. So the first of the live consoles, this is the smallest of the family, is the L100. And you can see it has 12 faders, plus a master and a focus fader, a high-resolution screen. In this particular case, it will use either an iPad or an Android device for additional control of the system, both if it's sitting there on the console or you can pick it up on a wireless network and walk around. This makes it very useful for ringing out a system or doing monitor mixes, at the stage. You're not tethered to the console in that regard. And all of the consoles will share all of these, capabilities. Moving on next, we have the L200. So we're getting into a larger number of faders, a larger engine, so that you're talking about 96 paths in an L100. Here you move up to 144 paths, which you build your inputs, your auxiliaries, your stems, your masters. And there are built-in effects in the console. They can be networked together so that you can have a monitor console and a front-of-house console together with one set of inputs, and they can share those two. So one of the things that always comes to the conversation is how does it sound? And so we're talking about, in all of these consoles, a 64-bit floating point engine. What does that mean? It means it's fundamentally impossible to overload this console internally. And one of the beauties of it is that you can put as much information as you want into it, and it never suffers from what many digital consoles do. They start to clamp down because the engine starts to work a little harder than it's really capable of doing. By having an engine that is this strong, you can put as many sources into it, and you will have maintaining a fidelity and maintaining a resolution within the system so that you can actually hear the details. And one of the things that people have said is, I've lifted the fader and it just sounded good straight away. So you're not fighting it. You're not trying to put, a dozen plugins on something to get a sound. It already has a very high fidelity sound. Again, and I will reiterate this as we talk through the live, all of the live consoles are built around the same quality of engine. It's called a Tempest processor. It's designed by SSL. It also goes by the initials of an OCP, which is Optimized Core Processor. It's beyond the scope of this conversation, but it's how we move the digits back and forth throughout the console. So the L200, 36 faders on the deck, another 2 up there, and a larger engine. Moving on from there, you get into the L350. Now, the L350 has just been released along with the L550 as a development and an evolution of the L300 and the L500. So we have a new engine that comes with all the new consoles, but also can be retrofitted into the existing consoles. Another hallmark of SSL is that we really do try to protect the investments. It's not something that you buy this year and 2 or 3 years down the road you go, oh, it's obsolete. We are very, very careful about protecting against planned obsolescence. So all the new ones are going to be 350s, and anyone who has a 300 can go up to a 350. Now we're talking about 216 channel paths in this console. And of course, we have layers and banks, because you're not seeing 216 faders, you're seeing a limited number, but you can very quickly access whatever signal you want. I'm happy to talk about this outside the scope, but a function that we call query, which is almost like a search function in a word processor, whereas you say, here's my drum VCA, I can query that and say, show me everything that's attached to that VCA with one button push, and it goes in both directions. If the lead vocalist, you want to see everything that's associated with the lead vocalist, you query the lead vocalist. And it becomes a very, very powerful system in that regard. And then the big kahuna, which is the L550. Now we're talking about 288 channel paths on a console with 36 faders on the deck, a high-resolution, large touchscreen, and an additional, what we call the channel control tile, which is an additional touchscreen for the console. It means that more than one operator can actually be working on it together, because the touchscreen, the large touchscreen in the middle and the smaller touchscreen off to the right can be looking at the same channel but at different functions. One can be doing dynamics, one can be doing equalization, one can be manipulating the routing of it while the other one is working on the headphone mix. So now it requires that we're going to have some I/O. Most live consoles are going to use stage boxes. We connect in 2 different fashions. We can either work with MADI, which is what you're looking right there. Is anyone not familiar with MADI? It stands for Multi-Channel Audio Digital Interface. We helped invent it, and it's a very, very powerful protocol that's been out for decades, and it's a great way of sending and receiving large numbers of channels over fiber, which is how we would interconnect from the console surface to the stage. So we do things in blocks of 32, we do analog, we do AES digital, and we also have a protocol that's called blacklight. And what that does is it multiplexes and demultiplexes multiple signals. We call it muxing and demuxing. And so on 2 cables about that diameter, you can hook up between the console and the stage up to 256 microphone inputs coming to you and 256 channels going back out the thing. So it's very, very fast to set up. Everything has redundant power supplies, which is a must in live because failure is not an option. And after MADI, we're looking at Dante. Now, I saw a lot of hands that went up with Dante. The way I like to look at Dante when I'm explaining it to someone who doesn't understand it is, if you walked into an office building with your laptop and you plugged into their network, all of a sudden you'd be able to see all of the resources that you were allowed to see. You could see the scanner, you could see the printer, you could see the server, you could see whatever interconnection. Dante fundamentally does that for high quality audio and high channel count audio. And it also means that it doesn't necessarily have to be all from one manufacturer. You have a Macintosh laptop, but you're connected to a Hewlett-Packard printer. You have a PC, but you're connected to whatever kind of server there is. It is a common language. And this has been exceptionally powerful and well received, primarily in fixed installations, although we're starting to see the touring customers of ours who are saying, Dante looks interesting. So if you've worked with it and you understand it, you can see that this would be a very powerful addition to a live console. We have a whole department at our company that is just focused on Dante and Dante development, which brings me to the next market that we're in, which is broadcast. This is the latest generation. It is also using a Tempest processor, which again is exceptionally powerful, but it's even bigger. We were looking at 256 channel or 288 channel consoles in live. These are 800 channel consoles. Why? Because if you've ever seen a really huge production in television, 800 channels is more than enough, but not that much more than enough that you would go, why would I ever need to use that? They will use that. And so we do a number of different surfaces. Again, in this particular case, everything is networked. So I have a little drawing that shows you what we can do with this. So you can have multiple control rooms, a production control room, you can have an engineering office. And again, if you think of this audio just like you would think of an office network, you begin to see the power that is possible with these systems. So down in the lower right, you can see the technical core, those two top gray boxes, those are the Tempest engines. So there's a primary and a redundant engine because failure is not an option in broadcast either. Dead air is dead air. What this allows us to do is to not only share our resources, but any other resources that would be on, any other audio resources that would be on the network. So this takes it to a whole nother level. So looking at the family of those products, the S500 is the larger of the two products that we have, and this would be for fixed installations. The control surfaces are modular, they are customizable. You can have them, anything from 16 faders up to 80 or 96 faders if you wanted to. Not really necessary in digital consoles because of the layering capabilities, but it is totally flexible in how you want to configure that. But sometimes you don't have a fixed installation, you want something like a fly pack. So we have just introduced the S500M, M standing for mobile. This is designed to go into road cases and to set up very quickly, and the wiring for it is very, very straightforward. And again, you're plugging these into digital networks using things like Cisco switches. And then it will recognize, because Dante has this wonderful self-identifying feature to it, whatever's on the network, it's going to show itself to the system. It's a very, very powerful approach. This is a slightly smaller control surface, the S300, slightly smaller engines typically. And this would be for things like newsrooms, local newsrooms, where you don't need the largest of surfaces. Again, using the same core processor, using the same Tempest engine. And then you get to what happens when you don't even need a console. We can actually take the Tempest control engine and connect it with a GUI. And this, a little bit of a delicate situation, but there are a lot of newsrooms now that are going to full broadcast automation. And what does that mean? It means the operator is no longer required if it's programmed. Now, you can't do this for everything. Human beings are still required, and they're certainly required to program the systems. But if you're doing the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news and it's exactly the same format every time, you can actually program that. So we do have a solution for that as well, and that is called the TCR, or the Tempest Control Rack. And that will work with a GUI and a processor, but it doesn't actually have a control surface. It's proven to be extremely popular, actually. So the big news here on the, all of those, by the way, were what we call the series the System T, T for Tempest. And so the biggest news that we have now is dynamic automation. What this is now indicating, and it's timecode based, is that we will be utilizing these consoles for things more like music mixing consoles would be, so that you can automate, and everything on the system is automatable because of it being a digital. Live, broadcast, music. Now this may look somewhat familiar, although it's awfully small compared to the one that you have here in the audio temple. This is a 48-channel duality delta. Now I'm going to talk about delta control, because that's what's new at SSL. Delta control is effectively an automation plugin. And for years and years and years, everyone struggled, and we are leaders in console automation. What do you do now that everybody's working within DAWs? They're writing their automation in DAWs, they're mixing in the box, but they don't really want to mix in the box, but they really don't want to lose the flexibility that you have when, if you start cutting up the sessions, editing your sessions, but you've already done automation. You want it to be what's called clip-based. If you cut a section out and it has a complicated automation move on it, you don't want to lose that. With linear time code, which were the older systems, once you started cutting that stuff up, it was all bets were off. Automation would be in the wrong place. So our solution was to build an automation plugin. What does this mean? This now means that you write the automation into the data stream of the workstation, but when it plays back into a plugin that drives the analog faders. So now you're automating into the box, but you're mixing out of the box with all the advantages that you have of a real analog console. And to put a little icing on the cake beyond that, things like auxiliary sends, all of the soft switches on the console, they can be automated as well. And if you cut things up, the automation will move together with it. And I like to refer to that as it's the holy grail of the combination of hybrid technology, which for our music clients is very, very important. So a couple of things of why it's cool. I'll see if I can read them off the screen here. As I said, fader moves are captured and played with the same accuracy as any DAW, so you're not losing any accuracy. We don't give or take away any intelligence to these systems. We simply mirror them. They're not tied to the time code anymore. They are tied to the clip. It's true for 10-bit fader resolution, which exceeds most of the DAWs that they're working with. It tracks everything that you do in the workstation into the analog console. The editing tools can be used, and of course, if you've worked on the Duality, you know that you can actually do workstation automation and editing from the console itself. Why this is good is because it doesn't, I see a shaking head here, is because you don't take your attention away from the matter at hand, which is the music, listening, staying in the sweet spot. You're no longer saying, now I'm on a console, now I'm in a workstation, now I'm in a console. It stays all within that focal point, which is kind of a hallmark of SSL. Everything resets, which I know is not impressive to you because you all grew up on workstations, but for an analog console where everything can be reset at the push of a button is a very powerful tool. And then the trim moves relative to the null point. We're kind of getting into the weeds here, but it is matching in the Pro Tools workflow. And the full implementation of SSL signature, so you get things like join, revise, motors off, and snap, which if you've used the system, you'll say, I'm not losing any of those features. And the new motor's off. Some people like to work with the motors off. Some people like to work with the motors on. So what else have we got? Plugins. Okay. We've been doing plugins for probably longer than you know. A lot of people say, oh yeah, I love those SSL plugins, you know, the ones from Waves. Yes, they are sanctioned, they are licensed, it's wonderful. The ones from Universal Audio as well, terrific. But, surprise, surprise, we also make our own plugins, and we have a great repertoire of them now. The channel strip is something that you're probably familiar, but this is designed upon the latest generation of SSL consoles. Not to take anything away from Waves and UAD and any other licensed versions of it, but I would encourage you to try them out. These were based more on the 9000 and actually our C200 consoles. How do you know if you like them? Try them. You can download them off the website. We have a rockin' reverb, which the coolest thing, aside from all the control that you have over it, is that it's got a built-in compressor, which means that you can use a lot of reverb, but you can also set it so there's a threshold that when things are really going, it'll tamp down the reverb. And when things go a little bit lighter, it'll open up the reverb. You have to try it to appreciate it, but it is a very powerful and creative tool, and it's a gorgeous sounding reverb. We build a plugin that's designed primarily for percussive and transient types of things called Drum Strip, which allows you to either squash or open up drum tracks depending on what you get. Vocal Strip, again, is tailored towards the vocal range and what you might need to fix a funky vocal. Not from a tuning perspective. We don't make an auto-tune, and we never will. You got to sing. Now, the X-Saturator, this is something that if you've worked on the Duality, you know about the VHD circuitry. It stands for Variable Harmonic Drive, And variable harmonic drive was originally designed as a circuit that emulates the overload characteristics and the sonic characteristics of both tube and transistor equipment. Because there is something that happens, anyone who's ever, how many guitar players we got in the house here, right? All right. There's a difference between a tube amp and a solid state amp, right? The way the way that they just react to the way the touch sensitivity. So very, very bright engineer that we have and has been with us for decades, has a background in valve technology, which is what they call tubes. And he was working once on a circuit design. It was actually an accident. And he looked at the output on the test set and he said, wait a minute, that looks familiar. I think I can do something with that. And so he fine-tuned that. That's in every channel of your duality console. Now we've done that, we've mapped the algorithms of that, and we've given you an X-Saturator. Again, I encourage you to just work with it. It just puts a texture. It's almost like, without it, if you're looking through a clear sheet of glass, when you put this on, you're looking through a basket weave type of material. It just does something texturally to it that words will fail me in trying to describe it, but just try it out. All right, now we have problem-solving devices like XEQ. Very, very comprehensive multi-band equalizer. This would be utilized for really problem tracks, or it'd be beautiful for mastering. So both this and the next one, which is X-Comp, because again, if you look at the channel strip, you're going to get a very straightforward compressor, limiter, expander, and 4-band parametric equalizer. But when you really need to dig in and fix very, very fine, I would say almost surgical types of applications, now you need to be looking at things like the XEQ and the X-Comp. So I guess XEQ, X-Comp, and VHD got together, had a baby, and it's the X-Valve Comp. Okay, so now we have a compressor that also has the valve technology, the valve VHD type technology built into it. So again, it's going to be horses for courses. And we may be accused of bringing out too many different kinds of things, but all of these are creative tools. And the next one is wild. Is anyone in the room, and don't worry if you don't raise your hand, is anyone in the room familiar with what an all-pass filter is? Good, because it's really esoteric. It had initially been utilized in tuning live PA systems because there's a polarity switch on consoles. Okay, some people call it the phase switch. There's a theta, the Greek letter on that. It's not really a phase switch. It's actually just swapping pins 2 and 3 on the XLR connector. It's a polarity switch. Then there are some devices that begin to sort of very incrementally move things in time. Phase is time. I have a whole presentation on what phase is all about. But when you're doing that with a delay line, you are delaying every single frequency by the same amount. So if you're trying to line up the inside kick drum mic with the outside kick drum mic, and you do it through a delay line, yeah, you'll get something that improves where it is if the mics are out of phase with each other, but you haven't taken to the limit. What X-phase does is it works with what are called the phase traces. And so if you can imagine in that vertical line, that's the frequency, that's the center frequency you're looking at, and then the two kind of curvy lines on the top and bottom are flipping it 90 degrees out of phase, 90 degrees in phase. And so you are manipulating the time domain of it around a certain frequency. And the reason why we have a phase flip button there, down sort of in the middle at the bottom, is it's easier to hear when you've canceled out the signal completely rather than when you've optimized the signal completely. So inside kick drum, outside kick drum mic, flip the phase, do the gross manipulations of it first, and then start moving this around and find out where is the center frequency of where the cancellations are happening. Once you've got that done, flip it in phase, and you will have optimized the signal. Phenomenal on grand pianos, anything where you've got, bless you, anywhere where you've got 2 microphones or more microphones that are on the same instrument. Direct bass and mic'd bass, things like that. You will be able to fine-tune the phase traces of these 2 signals in a way that has never been possible before. So we've got that on our live console on every channel, and now we provide it as a plugin. I get excited about all-pass filters because they're incredible problem solvers. I kind of saved the best plugin for last because it's the famous stereo bus compressor. If you've never worked with one, you just simply have to use it because you can use a tremendous amount of compression without it distorting or getting noisy. And it has been a hallmark of SSL consoles since the late 70s. It is in every one of our consoles, except for maybe the very, very smallest of the ones we've ever done. It is a great stereo bus compressor. You can use it on whatever you want, but it's really designed to put on the end of the mix and get that final sort of what they call the audio glue. It kind of just solidifies everything together. Then XL Desk. This goes to a whole different area. XL Desk is kind of a reaction to people saying, okay, SSL, you make all these great automated consoles with all these bells and whistles, but what if I could just get a great super analog console, and super analog is our circuit design, but nothing really else. I don't want any workstation control. I don't want any big bells and whistles. I just want that great SSL sound, almost like the world's greatest summing box. So we did that, but we took it one step further by saying, you can put whatever 500 series module you want into the penthouse of it. We can supply it with SSL 500 series, or if you have other favorites, you just slot them in. There's a very robust power supply in there, so it can handle any of the thirstier 500 series modules. So you've got all those 16 slots there available to you, but we have to give you this. That's the SSL bus compressor. So every one of the XL desks I'm fitted with that, and then there are different permutations of it as to, do you want it with a completely empty penthouse? Do you want some of our mic pre's? Do you want some of our dynamics units? Or do you want another brand that you want that's a 500 series? So very flexible and user configurable, as it were. And it also has all of the features of real consoles. It has aux sends, it has insert points, it's got a great mix bus, comprehensive monitoring, all that. But what it doesn't have are those other bells and whistles of workstation control. So it's really our sort of bread and butter analog console. Now this is real new stuff. And I was kind of hard pressed to say which one am I going to show first and which one am I going to show last. These are the last two sets of slides. 6 is a tabletop SSL console. It has the performance of an SSL console in a small self-contained package. It has a pair of our super analog mic pre's, which are exceptionally good. It has a bus compressor built into it. It has talkback. It has headphone outputs. I was talking to someone earlier today, and he said that is an ideal accoutrement to anyone who's mixing in the box but really just wants a final stage of an analog summing. It's also great for podcasts. It's great for small studios. It's not customizable. It is what you see. So having a look on the back, it may be a little difficult. I didn't know how big the screens were going to be. But all of this is available online, showing you all of the different features on the front side, and very, very easy to connect up on the back with both XLRs and DB25s. And that other connector down the left end of the device is for the external power supply, because to keep things really quiet, really good equipment typically will do an external power supply and get those fields away from the audio circuitry. You can come up and talk to me later, or you can quiz me in the Q&A. It is very affordable, shockingly affordable. So as I said, I had a choice what I was going to show for the last. This is Fusion. Fusion is SSL's very, very carefully and musically designed final processing box. It is a stereo device. It is designed, however you want to use it, you could always use it, but it is designed to be the last piece in the signal chain that takes an in-the-box mix and just gives you a last chance to salvage it sometimes. Or if you're doing mastering, Very, very carefully designed, and it is a completely new product with very, very fresh thoughts. So you've got, what have we got there? Right, so you have, I gotta get my glasses out, sorry guys. Right, the vintage drive. This is the latest iteration of the type of circuit I was talking about, the VHD circuit. So you can actually add some coloration and saturation to the overall mix. Then you have the brand new Violet EQ. Now, I have the feeling the reason they called it Violet is because historically with SSL, we've had the brown EQ, we've had the orange EQ, we've had the black EQ. We've always kind of been referred to as colors. They were different circuit design. This was completely designed from scratch with very carefully selected frequency points. But very straightforward. It's just, boost and attenuation on those frequencies. Then the high frequency compressor. How many times have you either done a mix or received a mix and it was just a little bit strident? It just had that kind of digital spittiness. We now have a high frequency compressor specifically for that, and that will soften up the sound very, very nicely. Now this one is actually quite exciting, and the first time that I heard it in action, this was the module of the Fusion that really impressed me the most. It's a stereo width control. Now, as we were talking about what happens a lot of times in digital mixing, if the engine really isn't up to the task, things that you wished were out here start to come in like this. And I'm sure you've all experienced that, because that's the engine kind of folding up, and you just don't get that wide sound stage anymore. This works both in stereo and both in the MS modes. And I will tell you that I listened to the unprocessed mix, and then this was put into it, and it literally opened up the sound stage. It was quite dramatic. So that's in there as well. We've got input and output gain, so you can match that, so that if you're doing a lot of processing in there, you can either tweak up the input if it's too weak, or you can tweak down the output if it's too loud from the processing. Of course, you're going to have some overload indicators there on both the input and the output to help you out. Output metering, stereo metering. And then you're going to have an insert point and where you want to put that insert point. And we just couldn't have it without a transformer. So we have custom wound transformers on the input and output of the device that are switchable. And this is, it's great to have an in-out switch. Is this improving it or is it not improving it? It's a very fast way to A/B that. And on that topic, a bypass switch. So after you've done all this stuff and you go, have I improved it? Have we gone over there? Is it too much? Is it too little? You can switch the entire unit in and out. And also, like the 6, stunningly affordable, which is kind of big news for SSL. We've never been known for being the least expensive guy on the block. But now we are making products that have a lot of features and are tremendous bang for the buck. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's new at SSL. And if anyone has any questions on what we talked about, or any questions about SSL, or any questions about what it's like being a recording engineer in the 1870s, I'm here to answer any of those. So I'll tell you what usually happens. Nobody has a question, everybody goes quiet, and then somebody asks a question, and that opens up the floodgates. So who would like to have a crack at any questions that you have about the company, the products? I'm not much of a cook, so I can't really tell you about cooking. We have one down here.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Matt. I'm in the recording arts program. I have a question about the XEQ.
Yep.
You were talking, you were saying that it's really good for mastering.
Mm-hmm.
Is it very heavy on CPU usage? Because in my head, when it's mastering EQ, it's normally a linear phase EQ. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about
I'll have to admit not to being the expert on that aspect of it, but I would say the best way to answer that is download a demo copy of it from the website, put it on your system, and again, it's going to be dependent on how much power that your system has. The reason why it's very useful as a surgical device is because it has so many hinge points, and there's complete flexibility. I mean, you can move, the mid-band frequencies, around each other if you want to. And so having that many, touch points in the equalizer means that if there's really a small problem, it can be anything from a notch filter to a broad or a shelving curve. But it takes the standard type of EQ, which is more like, hey, I got to get something fast, to something that really can delve into just the finest points of surgical repair kinds of work. But again, and I say this almost on anything, is turn this stuff on its head. Use it in ways that it was never designed to be used, because that's where the creativity truly lies. We'll give you the tools, but the way that you use them is going to be what makes them special.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. We got another question up front?
Hi, my name is Elijah Miller. I'm with recording arts degree. I have about 2-3 questions. My first question is about the 6. Would you say it would be, as far as a person who has a home studio, would it be a good replacement for a current interface?
Okay, if I understand the question, it's not an interface, it's purely analog. So it's probably going to be more applicable to, if just be using as on the return side of things, it would be a very flexible, like a summing mixer. It goes beyond that because it also has microphone inputs and what have you, so you can do overdubs through it. It has basic equalization, so it's not going to take the place of a large console. What it is going to do, and I didn't get into the specifics of what super analog technology is, and that's something that's patented by SSL, and it has to do with the circuit design, which in virtually all of our products, except the ones that are legacy products, it eliminates the coupling capacitors in the circuit. This is a little bit more on the technical side of things, and I have a whole presentation that some other time I'll be happy to do. What capacitors do. The reason why capacitors are in any analog circuit is somewhat historical. They are balancing devices, but they also have audio artifacts. They tend to have an impact on the high frequencies. They also tend to age and begin to sound nonlinear. While if you go on an old desk, channel to channel, channel to channel, they may start sounding differently because the capacitors are aging. They're drying out effectively. And a console then gets recapped, and that's the no fun zone, is recapping a console. So the same brilliant designer who came up with VHD came up with a capacitor-free analog circuit. And that is what we have dubbed super analog. Getting to your question, that's in the 6. That everything that we make, dualities, AWSs, even I would say probably the Fusion is a super analog device. And in the mic preamps as well. It's why in our mic preamps there's no sweet spot. People who've used traditional mic preamps, they go, oh yeah, I have to set it just, that's the sweet spot. Our preamps don't have a sweet spot. It's just pure gain. And so it really is, now you're hearing the sound of the microphone as it truly is. But eliminating these capacitors takes out the time domain distortion. And that has to do with, if you think that in life, like probably in this room right now, through the air, you are getting the most phase linear signal you possibly can, even more phase linear if I came out of the PA and you were listening to an orchestra. You're hearing true sound that way. But what these circuits do, I'm sort of getting into what I said I wasn't going to get into, but with these LC circuits, which involve capacitors, they start to smear the different frequencies. And so there's a little bit of delay on the mid-highs, there's a different bit of delay on the low-mids, it starts to striate these frequencies, and that is a distortion, and we've all become used to it, which is the saddest part. It's why when you plug into one of these super analog circuits, you'll hear a 57 and go, what'd you do? What we did was we let you hear the true sound of that 57. So The 6 would be a very valuable addition anywhere where you wanted to have really good analog summing, a limited number of analog inputs for recording, and just some of the nice things like a nice equalizer and a bus compressor. And now I'll tell you, it's $1,500. That console. One channel out of a 4,000 series was about $4,000. One channel. You know, your duality consoles are, I think, around $3,500, $3,600 for one channel strip, just to pull one channel strip out. That 6 is $1,500. Available at your local music store. Yeah. They're selling like hotcakes because it's built to SSL standards. So, you had other questions?
Yes. Hopefully I didn't forget it. My other question was, so as far as your plugins, your new plugins, do they come in a bundle?
They can be bought in a bundle, yes. Okay. The best way to find out the different, and we've changed recently, we've gone onto a subscription model, because that seems to be the thing these days. So you can buy them individually, and yeah, there are some what they call studio bundles, like that. But try them out. I mean, it's like, there's no point in buying something that you don't love, and the best way to find out if you're going to love it is to download it and try it out. Yeah, they're really, really good. You know, I'll leave it to you. It's in the ear of the beholder, but I've been very impressed. We spend a lot of time and a lot of listening developing these, because it's not always just get the numbers right. It really has to sound right.
Okay. And my last question, I promise. As far as other competitors, other companies like U Audio and Sound Toys, companies like that, why do you think SSL, I wouldn't say is not riskier as far as making different kind of plugins, but like you said, y'all don't make auto-tune plugins, things like auto-tune or distortion, different kind of plugins or just things of that nature. Why do you think SSL is not willing to take that road?
Because we're English, dear boy. No. First of all, someone said, why don't you guys get into the digital audio workstation market? I'm kind of like, somebody's already doing that. We are primarily a console and hardware manufacturer, and we kind of fell into plugins. Historically, the story is they originally started off, they called Duende, and for about almost 15 years, we were owned by Peter Gabriel, the artist. And he saw one of our $800,000 digital consoles that had all this great processing, and he said, in Peter Gabriel fashion, he said, I'd like to have the capabilities of what this console can do, but in the size of a pizza box. Literally, he said in the size of a pizza box. And what he was really saying was, how can I take some of the technology that we have developed for these large-scale digital audio consoles and put them in a more bite-sized package? And that begat Duende, which originally had its own processing engine, because the Macintoshes at that point didn't have the horsepower to run these very, very powerful plugins. Over time, we have, and as the processors have gotten very powerful, we've made them native. So these are actually called SSL native plugins. But I think that the market is pretty well subscribed to with very creative companies like UAD, like Waves, like Isotope, all these companies. And it's just not an area that we feel compelled to add to that. But if you had an idea, let us know. You never know. We're kind of doing what we do in the consoles and bringing them out so they can be utilized by the masses effectively. And the VHD, if you really wind that thing up, that is a distortable box if you want to. So what the future holds, not sure. But I think for the time being, it's kind of equalizers, compressors, reverbs, and then the VHD. And X-Phase, gotta try X-Phase, because if you've got multiple tracks that you've never really heard them properly phase align, X-Phase is the box to do that. That's the one I get most excited about, to be perfectly frank. Cool, how are we doing on time? We have 15 minutes.
Hey, Don.
Question in the back.
Oh,
Hey, Don. This is Keith,
Hey,
front of house
Keith.
engineer. How you doing? I have a question. SSL, when I was recording notes, I heard SSL, is respect the company and everything, to have like the best boards and everything. So now, like looking towards the future, are y'all moving more to the home studio kind of boards?
we're expanding
Right.
towards home, towards mass market types of devices, which is something I never thought I would hear myself say, because we've always been known for these giant and very expensive consoles.
Right.
But if you develop really great technology and you can figure out a way to condense it down to something and figure out a way to manufacture them in a cost-effective way, you can bring a tabletop SSL console to the market for $1,500, which is extraordinary. What we try always to do is to maintain the quality of the signal path and to build stuff well. I mean, we probably could have built 6, for $800, but then it wouldn't have been an SSL product. It wouldn't have met our standards. And we're very, very strict and stringent about manufacturing standards.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for the compliment. And the man with the red hat. Sorry, I have to put the actually, where's my hat? Carry on.
Ahoy, I'm Christian Brightman. I'm a recording arts major. I've been in a studio with SSL 500, the Hideout at Las Vegas. It's my favorite console in the entire world. It's such a great console. But the engineers, Kevin and Kane Churko, they're like, yeah, it sounds great, but it's basically $1 million volume knob at this point. And so I'm saying that only because and you've been an engineer for a good bit, I'm assuming. So how have you personally and SSL kind of dealt with, the changing in technology, how there's a lot of people that are, bedroom producers that do everything just on their keyboard or little AKG mini and doing everything. How has Solid State and I guess you as a personal engineer kind of dealt with that in recent years and that, growing?
Well, I'll start by answering how I've dealt with it. I think the beauty of any art form is that there aren't any rules. There's a presentation that I do where I talk about 4 different producers, music-making people. And if I remember them right, it'll be Trevor Horn, Mutt Lange, Mike Chapman, and Bob Clearmountain. The first 2 will take or have taken enormous amounts of time. Frankie Goes to Hollywood did a single that took 6 months to make. A single took 6 months to make. Trevor Horn will spend 3 years on a Def Leppard record, back in the day. And they sound amazing. And Bob Clearmountain will chop out 2 to 3 mixes a day, and they sound amazing. And Mike Chapman cut a record by a group called the Knack in a week, stem to stern, okay? There are no rules. There is no way to make records, or really just to say to make art. You can look at, what was it? Jeff Koons just sold a Mylar Rabbit for $9.1 million. It's like, who can figure this stuff out? I think it's great that you can make a record in a bedroom. My younger daughter has turned me on to Billie Eilish, who I think is wonderful. And I didn't quite get it at the beginning. I listened carefully and said, this is a very creative artist. She's making records in a bedroom with her brother, and will continue to do so because that's where she's comfortable. There's another theory that says you maybe do the first record in the bedroom, but then the second record, if you're successful, you go into a studio. And so there are no hard and fast rules about how you do it. How does SSL as a company deal with it? I would have never dreamt that we were going to do plugins, in the middle 90s when I started in 91 with the company. I would have never dreamt that we would get into things like that. I wouldn't really have dreamt that we would do live consoles, but we did. You respond to what the market needs are, and if you're really good, as Steve Jobs would say, you develop products that the market needs that they don't yet know that they need, and to be ahead of the curve. That's true success. So it's really a combination of being proactive and reactive to what's going on in the market, and to listen to your customers. You know, sometimes we can't do what they're asking for because it's kind of impossible, and sometimes somebody comes up with a great idea and you go, yeah, that'd be great. Features typically find their way into the digital products because somebody said, it would be great if I could do this. And then you just have somebody write a million lines of code, and there it is.
Hey.
If that answers your question, yeah. Anyone? I can hardly see, guys. I gotta tell you, it's like, I'm sorry I'm doing all this, but does anyone else have any thoughts? It's been wonderful speaking with you. I hope it was valuable. The website is up there. Hang on, not yet. If you want to know more about solid state logic, that's the website. Very easy to remember. And then it went away. Sorry. Let's see if I can get that back up again. Maybe not. Okay. Sorry. I'm afraid I put a thing. So, solidstatelogic.com. If you want to reach me for any reason, I'm very accessible, and I brought a stack of business cards here. I'm happy to speak with you. I wish you all great success in your future careers, and you're in a great place, needless to say. You have opportunities here that it's rare to be in an environment like this with the support that you get from the team and with the facilities that they provide you with, and we're honored to be very well represented here at Full Sail. So on that, I say thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. We appreciate everyone attending. Big round of applause for Don Wershba. Thank you so much for being here today. Always an honor to have you. Guys, we are mindful of everybody's time today, so we will ask you as this panel concludes to make your way out the doors. Certainly there will be a little bit of time for meet and greet in the lobby, and thank you for attending.